From the land of conjurers, flying through the net to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the witching hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever or whenever you are listening to this program. I am China the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing this evening, Jenny?
I'm post-kindergarten substituting today, so I'm tired, but we're good. I'm excited. I'm so excited.
We're working through all the technical fallout of taking this show on the road. So
and your computer also taking a dump.
It took a show on the road too.
Yeah.
When we went to Lake Shawnee to join Forsaken Souls in their investigation out there. Basically, we had we bought the mobile station, the mobile unit for that, and but I had to rip a lot of things off of the well-oiled machine here. And when I came back and plugged it all back into the well-oiled machine, it wasn't well-oiled anymore. So we'll get it back to where it is.
You can never put everything back in the box how it came out.
Yeah, and that's true. Yeah. And I think at this point, I've just realized we just need to have everything almost separate, just a complete mobile unit in and of itself. So yeah, we'll get there. We will get there. It's good. So I hope everyone is having a wonderful evening. It's Thursday. We've almost made it. Tomorrow's Friday, and I don't know, around the corner, I imagine holidays and breaks and hopefully for all of you, some well-needed relaxation maybe right around the corner. So we'll get started today. Are we ready to get into some news?
Yes, sir. What's
all right, the first story for tonight is people have been searching for this song from the X-Files for 25 years until now. I saw this, it's either yesterday or today. It was pretty recently. It was a news article that struck me. So when you tune into the classic 90s sci-fi series, The X-Files, it's safe to assume mystery is afoot. Typically, it's aliens and other paranormal phenomena, but how often is the show the source of the mystery? So the saga begins with Lauren Ancona lounging on the couch at her parents' house outside of Philadelphia. She was zoned out on her phone with an old episode of The X-Files playing in the background when a particular tune from the show caught her ear. It was too good to be background, she told NPR, and I paused it and rewind it and was asked what that was. It was an episode from 1998, and the scene in question takes place at a bar in Nevada where a country western love song plays in the background. And she said the lyrics grabbed her attention. She brought out her phone app to try to get it to identify the song for her because she liked it, and nothing came up. So when she looked up the lyrics, she came across a whole bunch of other X-Files fans who had been searching for over 25 years to find out what the song was. She posted the question on X, and it exploded within days. She got her answer. Composer Rob Kearns came across the viral post and reached out to his friend, who just so happened to be a co-writer behind that song, Dan Marfisi. He said, "You might want to check out this Twitter thread, and if you jump in, you will be a hero." So she said she got her cape, logged on, and it was a party. It turns out people were having trouble finding the song because Marfisi co-wrote the song with Glenn Jordan for the background specifically for that X-Files scene. So they essentially wrote a song. So
it was just a song just for the episode.
Yeah, and they wrote with the composer, and they had titled it "Staring at the Stars."
I was kind of hoping that it was going to be like a Mandela effect. Like a glitch in the Matrix. The song just never really existed.
Yeah, the Mandela. Yeah, where did it go? But it's on tape.
But that's cool.
They produced the song,
figured out what it was,
put it on the show, and so they said they turned it into the show, and that was the end of it. And they said we put it to bed and went on the show, and here we are 25 years later, and maybe it's a new hit. We'll
people want to hear it.
There you go.
I better get it on the radio.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that comes along with streaming and like just the access we have to media now. It's like you never know. Well, that happened with Stranger Things, with Running Up the Hill. And,
with Kate Bush.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Just revived Rocking Around the Christmas Tree.
There you go.
Yeah.
It did. And you got anytime the X-Files makes the news, I feel like, you have to talk about it. So. Second story for tonight is the gigantic hole in the sun wider than 60 Earths is spewing super fast solar winds right at us. So
I saw that.
Yeah. Well, we had been talking about the impending solar maximum and stuff like that lately, and more solar flares and stuff like that were going to happen. An enormous dark hole has opened up on the sun's surface and is spewing powerful streams of unusually fast radiation known as solar wind right at the Earth. The size and orientation of the temporary gap, which is wider than 60 Earths, is unprecedented at this stage of the solar cycle, scientists say. The giant dark patch on the sun, known as coronal hole, took shape near the sun's equator 197,000 miles an hour within 24 hours, spaceweather.com reported. And since December 4th, the solar void had been pointing directly at Earth. Experts initially... What's up?
I saw... there's I don't know if he's an astronomer or what his actual title is, but there's a professor guy that I follow on TikTok, because I actually like to look at, important things on TikTok.
Mud cracks.
And he was talking about the coronal hole, and he was talking about how like the way the rays of the sun and the way that it works is that it's like funneling in on itself sometimes, and that's what makes that hole. So it was like actually not really a big deal is what he was trying to say. But like people were freaking out about it.
If you were on social media, especially the things that pop up on my feed doing the show, it was like it was doomsday out there. There were all kinds of pictures of this hole, and but one important thing that it does kind of signify that it talks about here is that the solar activity has been ramping up all year as the sun nears the explosive peak of its roughly 11-year solar cycle known as the solar maximum.
That's what Dull SAF just said, solar maximum. And CMC is going to say it's going to cause a lot of auroras. A lot of auroras, maybe issues with radio signals and all kinds of, and it's always been a question about, if we were to get some kind of flares and peak solar activity, it could really wreak havoc on some of our infrastructure. So that's what happened with your muting earlier. It was the corona hole.
That's what it was. So in October, to kind of finish it off, it says in October, scientists revised their solar cycle forecast and now predict that the explosive peak could begin in early 2024. Okay. So there's a prediction from the scientists going into the next year.
Scientific prediction for next year.
Yeah.
All right. What's the last story for today?
Another story I saw for tonight was electrician discovers Ouija board stuffed inside the wall of a client's house. There's video of this. I'll try to post it over on our Discord.
That's how a lot of horror movies start.
There's a video. You can look at it for yourself, but a staple of horror movies, as you just said, paranormal investigations and mediumship sessions. The Ouija board is typically operated by having participants place a finger on a planchette, which they move between the printed letters and words to spell out a message from beyond the grave. While many dismiss them as supernatural claptrap, others remain convinced that they are the real deal, even warning people against their use in fear of summoning something unnatural. For some, such fears are so genuine that they dare not touch or even set eyes on them. Such was the concern of an apprentice electrician recently when he discovered a thin piece of wood stuffed between two walls while doing work at a client's house. In a video clip he recorded of the incident, he can be seen flipping over the board to discover that it was in fact a Ouija board that someone had hidden in the wall for unknown reasons. His understandable reaction was to immediately return it back into the wall where he found it. He's heard saying, "Nope, back in the wall," and in the wall it goes, and he finishes work to cover it back up again. So, was it put there by the owner? Was it there from a previous owner? Or was it all an elaborate social media ruse for his TikTok feed? We'll never know, but who knows? That's the way it goes. And then the last short news story I wanted to bring up for tonight was brought to us by our own CMC Air Boss, who shared a video on Discord of 3 UAPs that were captured live during a YouTube broadcast this past weekend. You can go there and start the video, and at 1:30, 1 minute and 30 seconds, 4 minutes and 37 seconds, and then later about almost 7 minutes in, you see 3 distinct at separate times, kind of, well, I guess I would say kind of the tic-tac kind of UFOs that have been all the rage. Yes, you can post a video link, CMC. Feel free to put that in chat and tell us what you think. I mean, you know, there's tons and tons of videos out there. I think that one looked as, I don't know, as genuine as anything, you know. It definitely fits the profile of what's going on.
It was just a live feed of the LAX, whatever they were doing. And it just happened to show up in the background. Yeah. Which
the context, you know, and I didn't watch the live stream, and I don't know the people who did the live stream, but I think there's a certain context to it of like, if you see a UFO video taken from a cell phone now and it gets put onto TikTok or it gets put onto YouTube or whatever, you don't understand the context of the video.
Yeah.
And whether that was like, hey, I'm going to create a fake or whatever and DaVinci Resolve and put it out there for the world to see. But when you're doing a live stream and it has absolutely nothing to do with UFOs, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, what was that? Okay. Oh, whoa, what's that? And then you have people filming from different areas, like they're switching to different feeds and stuff. And so that was pretty interesting, I thought. I thought it was very interesting. And that was the weird news.
Yay. And a good segue into our guest.
Yeah, very good segue into our guest tonight. Preston Dennett began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of more than 30 books and more than 100 articles about UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books are Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, Phenomena Magazine, Outer Limits magazines, and more. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, Portuguese, French, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. Please welcome to the show tonight, Preston Dennett. Welcome to the show, Preston.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yay.
Well, we are super excited to have you on, and there's so much to talk about. I guess the best way to get started tonight, well, actually, just out of curiosity, have you seen, it's kind of making the rounds, not just the Tic Tacs, I guess, from this video. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but this is something that's been kind of taking the paranormal world by storm when it comes to UFOs, all the things with the congressional hearings. Kind of, what's been your thoughts on that lately?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's been a sea change, I think, with this subject. The congressional hearings have given a lot more legitimacy to it. Some people are calling this the first steps towards disclosure. I'm not sure I'm willing to go that far. I think there's still very clear evidence that the cover-up is still in place and our governments are lying and have no plans to be fully truthful and transparent with this subject. I'm a little jaded, having been in this field for so long. But yeah, I mean, a lot more people are now taking this seriously, and it's really encouraging to see this being discussed officially as an honest-to-God, true subject with validity to it. So that's huge. That alone is amazing.
Yeah, we had spent a lot of time talking about that, you know, in our streams and with each other, and it always kind of seemed like some of it was look over here while there's something else happening over here. But I think the one thing that I thought was great that came out of it was them the government making, or at least from what they're saying, who knows if it's really for real or not, that they're not going to be persecuting and ridiculing the people who come out with, as witnesses and want to tell their story of what they saw. So hopefully,
as long as you didn't see actual ETs. If you saw a UFO, a sighting, that's fine. If you were taken on board, we're not going to talk about that.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a limit to what they're willing to talk. Well, then that's happening even now with some of the whistleblowers or whatever that intelligence people who have come forward. There's almost like a line that they don't want to cross. I feel like we can talk about these crafts and what they could possibly be. The government has kind of been wanting to talk about that, but not so much. Well, I guess like the biologics and stuff like that have been discussed. That's almost going a little bit too far. I feel
it's funny to me that they're kind of waffle on what this might even be. Extraterrestrial intelligence. I mean, they're ETs. They are alien. I mean, how much evidence do you need? I do think we have the crashed vehicles and the bodies. It's not just Roswell, the Roswell crash of New Mexico in 1947. There's so many others. And Grush is just one in a long, long line of whistleblowers, and Fravor and Graves, many, many high-level military witnesses. So it was interesting to hear them talk when the congressional members gave them a chance.
Yeah.
They did most of the talking. But still, some really strong rhetoric. They said UFOs are real. There is a cover-up. The Pentagon isn't cooperating. Some of us have seen UFOs, which I thought was amazing. But then he said, and it made me angry a little bit, he said, yes, some of us members of Congress have seen UFOs, but I'm not going to name names. I thought to myself, wait a second, where's the truth and transparency? Name names. You just said you want truth. Lay it out.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there was some really interesting things that happened, and listening to the testimony, it was almost surreal. There was like moments where it just seemed like, is this really happening? But then at the same time, I kind of go where you were going, Shani, of like, because I asked myself in the moment when it was happening, I said, is this disclosure? Like, are we seeing disclosure? And now when I look back on it, I said, it's like, I don't know what it is. Even right now, I don't know. I don't really know what it is. And I don't know if it's like you say, a lifetime or a long time of kind of being jaded by government cover up, or is this something new? Is this something different?
I don't know. I think to me, the end game of disclosure would be show us the craft. Let's see the Roswell craft in the museum. Show us the bodies. Let us touch it. Let this be absolutely indisputable, conclusive. You cannot pull, back on this. And we're not seeing that. So this was all talk, no action, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to look at it. There was a lot of talk, but there's always been a lot of talk. So the next step is to provide that evidence, and they still aren't willing to go there necessarily, because it's like, well, we know that it's not U.S. craft, and we know that it's probably not Russian craft or Chinese craft, and it's going, okay, so what does that mean? Like, and they won't say the words.
They don't say it.
And just to go back to your news story, if I find a Ouija board in the wall of my house, it's going out. I'm not putting it back in.
Not putting it back in.
No.
Yeah, why would you put it back in the wall? Exactly.
That would freak me out. I've used the Ouija board a few times, of course, the paranormal research, which is all connected to UFOs. And I've talked to some people who had some real, honest-to-God horror stories with it that led to bad hauntings.
Yes.
So, the Ouija board has got to go.
I would agree. I don't think it should go back in the wall.
So there's maybe we can do a poll now later. Who would put the Ouija board back? Who would send it out? And maybe who would take it out and get the planchette out and go along?
Who's burning the whole house down? Just
burn it.
Again. Yeah.
Speaking of weird news stories, I saw someone, they made a Ouija board the size of like a basketball court. And the pointer itself was the size of a car. I'm like, what are you going to do? Sit on that?
Oh, wow.
Crazy. No, that could summon a huge demon.
We only want small, small demons.
We just want little demons. Yeah. I wanted to know what you thought about them changing the terminology from UFO to UAP.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I hate it.
Me too.
I think it's another diversionary tactic. And let's just start from the beginning. UFO is not a great term, unidentified flying object, which I think now has become synonymous with extraterrestrial craft. But it could be anything. And when one of these things lands, it's definitely not flying. And if someone's taken on board, are we really going to call it unidentified? Because you are surrounded by it. There's no chance of misperception. So it's a terrible term that we began with, from the beginning. And UAP is even worse and really no different.
Yeah.
I don't understand what the tactic is there other than to just sort of make it even more confusing. No, I'm not a fan.
Sometimes when words start to have too much of a certain connotation, as Americans, we just like to change it so we can pretend like it's something else. But it's really just the same thing. So what would be your preferred term for it?
I still like UFO because it's easy, it's understandable. I think we all know what it means.
Yeah.
When they came out with UAP, it made me laugh because people sometimes say, "Oh, ufology, you're a ufologist." But if you put that up to UAP, what does that make you? A U-apologist? Or U-apology?
Yeah.
So, I would just call them extraterrestrial craft. And as far as people say abductions, I don't like that word. It's very negative. And some of the people I interview, I would say most of them don't like it either. So I call that an onboard experience. Contactee, I think that's a better term than abductee.
Contact, yeah.
Contactee.
Some people use the word experiencer. I'm like, well, it's okay, but we're all an experiencer of something, so it's not a very definitive term. We're suffering from semantic disaster in this field.
Yeah,
and I get it.
I mean, words are hard. I'm sure, as you know, as a person who's written 30-some books. But figuring out what the right words are for things sometimes can be.
Well, it's so funny not funny, but it's certainly interesting to me when I interview people who've been taken on board a craft and are trying to look for words to describe things they've never seen before, or maybe not have heard of, like telepathy. Not everyone has heard of that term. And people will tell me, they were talking in my head. I don't know how to describe it, but I could hear them inside my head, but it wasn't with my ears. I'm like, oh, telepathy.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to that too, like what I thought about when they changed the term, I liked it at first because I read an article the first time I heard them switch it to UAP, and I was reading an article probably about when they started talking about the congressional hearing that was going to happen. They had designated as unidentified aerial phenomena. And then I had seen another thing that had USPs, so unidentified submersive phenomena. And I was like, well, I explained that to Jenny, and I was like, I'm okay with them making that distinction. But here lately, I guess I had that wrong, and it changed again because the UAP USP thing is done. It's like unidentified. It's not aerial. I don't know. They've changed it. So the reason I did like it evidently isn't what it is anymore.
Yeah, well, I've heard unidentified aerial objects, UAO, unidentified aerial vehicle, UAV, USO, of course, being unidentified submersible object.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to load up on terms here.
Exactly.
And they're all really the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a craft. I'm a big believer that that's what we're dealing with. I know there's a lot of theories bouncing around as to what the origins of UFOs are. But I think the extraterrestrial theory, and I hate to even call it that, because I think we have enough evidence to conclude what it is. I think that best explains the totality of the evidence. Because, perhaps they are interdimensional, but who isn't? We are interdimensional. And perhaps they can time travel, but that doesn't preclude them from being extraterrestrial.
Very true.
So there's yeah.
Well, I
there's
guess
still lots of questions.
Yeah, there is, and yeah, that is for sure. I guess a good way to start with this, to kind of go back and let the audience kind of know, like, how did you get started in the field and in your UFO research, and how did that progress for you to get interested enough to do all the work that you've done there?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because I was repulsed by the subject. I hated it. I didn't think there was anything to it. And I honestly thought that people who believed in UFOs were not educated or were misperceiving. I bought the Air Force line from Project Blue Book. All UFO encounters can be explained as one of three things. It's either a hoax, a hallucination, or a misperception. And that's what I believed growing up, even watching shows like In Search Of, where they interviewed people, or it would appear every now and then on TV. But I just, I was very scientifically, rationally minded. And I know how far away the stars are. I'm a huge astronomy fan. I just couldn't conceive of it. But of course, that did all change. And lucky for me, I was pretty young. I was 21 years old, 1986. And a report came on the news. I remember the day, actually, it was November 17, 1986. There had been a really amazing sighting over Alaska. A Japanese commercial airliner, Captain Kenju Torochi, and his crew saw this UFO pacing their craft for a long time. It was a great sighting. I mean, it was onboard radar caught it, multiple witnesses. They requested a course change. This craft still followed them. A really good sighting. But the news came on and they just laughed about it. Showed the pilot, kind of joked at him and moved on. They showed the pilot and I thought, that poor man, he's deluded. He must be seeing a reflection off the ice cap. And I'm thinking all of this without any evidence to support my theory whatsoever. But I thought, he's going to throw away his job. Why would he do that? What an idiot. And of course, he was grounded. I found out later, reporting UFOs, if you're a pilot at that time, was not something you did. So he got in some deep water for that. But at any rate, it interested me. And I started thinking about it, and I remembered that my older brother, Mark, who's, 6 years older than me, had said he'd seen a UFO. I was like 14 years old, and he comes running into the house, maybe 13, around there. And it's like, I just saw a UFO, me and my friends. It was at treetop or telephone pole level. I'm like, Mark, just shut up. UFOs aren't real. You possibly have seen one because they don't exist. And I didn't listen to him. And I regret that now because after hearing this report in the news, I asked him about it. He gave me this look like, really? You want to hear now? I'm like, yeah, tell me. And he described this amazing sighting. In brief, it was he and his two friends, Phil and Greg, were driving down Reseda Boulevard. That's outside of LA where I lived. And it was at night, and they saw what they thought very briefly was a helicopter, but it made no sound. And it was quite close, a couple of 100 feet away from them. And it was metallic, it was a classic saucer, little lights around it, a dome on top. And it started to move away, so they chased it in their car down Reseda Boulevard for 15 minutes, passing other cars who were also, hanging out the window and looking at it. So he told me all this, and I'm like, Mark, are you, I knew he wasn't lying because, he's my brother.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear to me he wasn't misperceiving or hallucinating. So I was at a loss. And I'm just kind of looking at him like, this can't believe what I'm hearing. And he said, I'll give you Phil and Greg's number, his friends. If you want to talk to them, they'll back me up. And of course I did, and they did. And that's what opened the door for me. And boy, did I get a shock when I found out that two of my sister-in-laws, or future sister-in-laws, had seen UFOs. One saw grays in front of Stagg Street Elementary School, gray aliens.
Wow.
And yeah, she didn't tell me that at first. She just told me this sighting. But I had we had family friends, of course, and one of them, Sylvia was her name, a flight instructor, a good witness. described this incredible sighting. She had another corroborating witness with her. Another family friend, Mark Grant, had a close-up sighting with, I believe, missing time, though that kind of escaped me when I first talked to him. And stupid me brings it up at work because I was starting to lose my mind with this. And I was buying books thinking, I'm going to disprove these guys. It's swamp gas. Of course, the books did not say that. And I found out this had been studied for decades. And scientists and high-level military officials were taking it seriously. And there was a cover-up and so on. So I bring it up at work. And I won't use the lady's name, but I worked her desk was right next to mine. I'll call her Diane.
Okay.
Because I ended up writing about her, and her case was pretty extensive. But she's like, "Oh yeah, UFOs. Me and my whole family saw one." I'm like,
wow.
Okay, what did you see? What did you think you saw? And she described this star-like light that would dart across the sky for hours, stopping and then turning at right angles and going from horizon to horizon. I tried to convince her it was a helicopter, and she just laughed at me like, no. My daughter's picking me up. You can talk to her, which of course I did. So it was a long sighting, and this is when kind of my belief system collapsed. Dorothy walks in, and I love Dorothy because she's unfiltered and just bawdy and funny and outgoing. And she says, "Oh, UFOs, one followed me home from the library when I was a kid." Dorothy, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, really. And she described the whole story. She was just like 13 years old or 12 and had snuck out of they were at the library and snuck out 5 minutes before it closed to smoke a cigarette before their mom picked them up. So they know exactly what time it is. And that's important to the story. Mm-hmm. So they're there at 8:55 smoking a cigarette on the front steps of the Pio Pico Library in Koreatown. Wow. A part of LA, which is densely populated. I went down to that library, you can bet I did, to check it out. And she said there's this star-like light that dropped out of the sky and hung over the telephone wires across the street. And it was a classic silver disc. Wow. Wobbling. It had little lights all around it. And no portholes or anything. But she's describing this, and her friend Carol saw it too. I ended up interviewing both of them and her mother because her mother drives up and they all see it. They're like, "The flying saucer." And it's 100 feet away. So she freaks out and says, "Get in the car." And they race home. Well, they live 5 minutes from the library. And this darn craft followed them home over their car.
Wow.
And the mom's freaking out and the kids are like really excited. They rush into their home and go to the upstairs and look out the window, and it's still there in the front yard. It does back and forth, back, and then goes up at a 45-degree angle. Gets smaller and smaller. It's a tiny little star, and it disappears up into outer space. And that's when Carol turns and looks at the clock. She's like, "Dorothy, look at the clock. It's 10:15. What happened to the time?"
Oh, wow.
So Dorothy's looking at me, telling me this. She's, I don't know what happened to the time. And me, being an unexperienced, I'm not even a researcher at this point. I'm like, "Dorothy, you were abducted." She's like, "What?" I don't do that now to witnesses. I don't, you approach it a little bit more tactfully. Like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You had missing time." Because I just bought Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, which at that time was a hardback by a small publisher, not this huge runaway bestseller that it ended up later becoming. And I said, "I think you might have had a more extensive encounter than you remember." And it turned out her friend Carol had a bunch of experiences and that they were following her around, and clear she was the target. But I interviewed all of them, and that was it. My belief system collapsed. I was upset for a year, and I bought every darn book I could find. I joined MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, once I found them. And I'm like, okay, they have a newsletter. I want all your newsletters going back to when you were founded. I dived deep into this.
It's interesting that you were 14 and you didn't have the experience, but your brother did. And it's like, it comes into your awareness at that time. Almost like they're like, "Hey, Preston, we're trying to get your attention." And then it takes all those years until finally you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready. I had just discovered science fiction, and that definitely helped. I'm a huge sci-fi fan.
Yeah.
But even that was a lot to take in. I was not a happy camper. I was really upset because it wasn't taught in schools. It wasn't being taken seriously. My friends and family had lied to me, my coworkers. That's the way I looked at it. Like, you didn't tell me this. How could you not tell me this? Everyone needs to know this. This is a big deal.
Yeah. But it wasn't so easy to say those things back then. Not like it is today, but even then.
Hard now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I cleared many a room at a party. Like, oh, these guys. My family thought I'd lost my mind. And
we did have
well, that's why we have a question. Go ahead.
We did have a question before we get too far away from the subject of having a hard time believing it. Apple Burrito wanted to ask, why do people always immediately react as if the possibility of extraterrestrial activity is completely out of the realm of possibility?
That's a wonderful question. And I think because, and I thought hard about this. I mean, what's so hard to believe about this? Look at the stars outside. How many do we, could we possibly be alone? That would be even more scary. But I think the reason is, honestly, because of the government cover-up. There's been a very concerted, well-orchestrated, well-funded cover-up of UFO information across the board. And, with our tax dollars, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's been very effective. And they've worked very, very hard, a lot of time, money, and effort to make UFO witnesses look like fools, idiots.
And at this point, over 4 generations of people.
Yeah, been very effective. To even today, people are like, where's the evidence? I'm like, you haven't done your homework. Skeptics at this point have not done their research. I don't mean to be rude about it, but honestly, you need to do your research before you start making statements like there's no evidence, because there is.
Well, and I think what you were just talking about brought up an example for me, and that's that this whole thing really is a shared experience, where we've talked about this before. You were talking about the party and clearing the room, and that's one of the reasons we started doing this show, because Jenny would be like, we'd be at a party and someone would say, Jenny would say, okay, it's time to head home. And she would find me in the corner, talking about UFOs or ghosts or whatever, to somebody at the party. And, I could just talk about it for hours and hours and hours. And when you first bring those subjects up, a lot of the time people are like, oh yeah, I don't believe in that. And I don't believe in this. And you're kind of the weird guy at the party, or at least I was. And then all of a sudden you're like, all of a sudden, well, this one time.
Exactly.
And that's all. Even the people who sometimes are the most fanatical about not believing in it still have an experience, or someone they were close with who they can talk and share their experience. And your story made me remember one of mine, talking about the UFO that was chasing, kind of going over the car. And my grandmother had an experience like that, a very no-nonsense kind of woman. She was retired as a school teacher. And when she was a young woman, I want to say early 50s, was driving down Portsmouth Boulevard in the back of a vehicle, like facing backwards with her parents, even though she was an adult at the time. And told me several times the story of a saucer going down the street, following their car. And she said, I'm not an idiot, I'm a college educated woman from that period of time too. And then they were leaving the laundromat, and it followed them all the way down Portsmouth Boulevard. And she talked about the saucer shape, and it had lights that were flashing on it. And, so it's like, what am I supposed to tell this woman who helped educate me, mistook it for the moon? Yeah. This is a real experience that somebody had,
Yeah. It's so funny because that would happen to me all the time at work. I get lots of eye rolling and sighs and kind of uncomfortable silences. And then they come up to me in private. So, I didn't want to tell you while everyone was around, but this happened to me.
Yeah.
So, all the time. I think it's far more common than people realize. But again, this cover up has really done a number on the public.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you actually you were talking about the one that happened near a school, and we were looking at the one case recently that I know happened in Africa in the schoolyard, and I saw that you had written about that too. Did that seems to be a place where there's been lots of contact in schoolyards and things of that nature?
Sure. Yeah, I started getting my own cases pretty early on, and that first one, my sister-in-law. I mean, by perhaps coincidence, it was in front of a school because this was at night and no one was there really. But she's just walking down the sidewalk near her home in Van Nuys and saw what she thought were two children standing under the floodlight in front of Stagg Street Elementary School and walking with her dog, Sarah. And the dog didn't react at all, but she walks right up to these two, quote, kids, staring at them because they're bald. They're all facing each other, almost kissing, but not. Wearing olive green jumpsuits, and she's looking down at their feet, and they're like floating an inch off the ground. And they turn and look at her, and she realizes they have huge heads, big dark eyes, a tiny little nose and mouth, grays, grays as we know them. And she said it was like being woken up when you're awake. Off she went, walking as fast as she could without panicking and running away. And then I interviewed a guy who had missing time on the playground in Hawthorne, again in California, when he was a kid. He's had a lot of experiences, but I didn't really think much of it. It's just another case that I was researching. Then that Zimbabwe case came out at Ariel Elementary School in November of 1994, where, in brief, for those who don't know about it, the 200 kids on the playground and at least 60 or 70 of them see this UFO land, and some of them see ETs come out and communicate with them telepathically. It's a big, big case. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. There's that other one in Australia. And I instantly thought of what happened at Melbourne, Australia, at Westall High School in 1966, April of 1966, where a UFO landed next to the school. And some 300 or 400 kids and teachers saw it.
Wow.
I'm like, gosh, that's amazing. There's two schoolyard cases. Wait, there's another.
Yeah.
I vaguely remembered something happening in Florida, and I had to look it up. It was at Opelika, Florida, at Crestview Elementary School. Get this, because there's this weird timing to these schoolyard encounters. 1 year to the day after Westall, Crestview Elementary School had UFOs land next to the school. 200 teachers, students saw it. The military showed up just like at Westall and cut the school day short, and kids were told to go home. Those who could walk or bike home were sent home, and the others were basically put on the school bus, and there was a big cover-up and explanations issued that it was helicopters and so forth.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, well, it's pretty well known too.
Wow.
So, and here I am, a researcher for what was it, like 30 years at this point when I started really digging into this. The Africa case, Zimbabwe, was just gaining more and more traction over the years and getting more popular. Then I thought, oh gosh, there's that case in Broadhaven, Wales, another elementary school, UFOs landing. Yeah. This was like 77 or abouts, and ETs coming out. I thought, well, Hillsdale College, that's a school. That was one of the most famous cases in Michigan.
Just keep coming.
And that was 2 weeks before Westall High School in Australia. Wow. And when that happened, 87 students and teachers and police officers, it hovers for 2 hours, it actually lands. A huge case. It's what basically pulled J. Allen Hynek into becoming a serious researcher, and it dissolved Project Blue Book. It was a mess. That's when the whole swamp gas fiasco came from, and it ended up at congressional hearings. It was a big deal. But this is so interesting because Jim and Coral Lorenzen, who are my heroes in this field, the first civilian investigators really of any importance, said, we have a bunch of schoolyard encounters. This is a thing. It's going to happen again. And of course it did 2 weeks later in Westall High School. But John Keel said, oh, yeah, I've got cases where they're landing at schools after Hillsdale happened. And real quick, Raymond Fowler, who, Betty Andreasson fame and the Allagash abductions, said he had 15 unexplained cases up to that point. This is April. And no, it's March, actually. So just 3 months. And he says 15 unexplained cases, 8 took place at schools. So I started freaking out. I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. I found 100 cases after digging through the databases and the newspaper articles and all the books I could find, because you can see I've got a lot of them.
Yes, you do. I bet that's probably not even all of them.
No, it goes. You can't see the rest. But yeah, I found 100 cases, and I found something really interesting, which is that there's nothing like this in the UFO literature in terms of there being very widely viewed daylight encounters. There's no other cases quite like this. I looked at sporting events and concerts, and there's a few, but not 100. It's closer to 200 now. These are very low level, long lasting, widely viewed accounts. By that I mean it's 40 or 50 people. It's kind of on the low end.
And mostly children, right?
Yeah, but also adults who are educated.
Yeah.
Over half of the cases do involve adults, just so we know that it's not just kids telling stories.
Well, I was thinking, what's the purpose of them coming to talk to the children?
Yes.
And, from what I've seen about the Zimbabwe case, it seemed like they were trying to give helpful information to children about what we need to do with our planet. Did you find that was true in other cases as well?
People. Communication to that degree is not super common in these cases. I did find that half the cases were at elementary schools, which was significant, I think, because those are our youngest children who are very, unpolluted by cultural beliefs and great witnesses. They're like sponges. So, no, not a whole lot of communication. I honestly think what it is a very effective publicity campaign, because that's what they are doing. We see this. UFO researchers have noticed for a long time that the UFOs put on what we call displays. They want to be seen. Often they are elusive and evasive, and you can't track them down, and there's not a whole lot of evidence in most cases, I should say.
Yeah.
But with these schoolyard cases, they clearly want to be seen. So I think it's a very effective method to sort of go to the source and let's convince the kids when they grow up, it'll be a complete change of attitude. And it has been.
Almost like they're like, here's your disclosure.
Yes, I'm so glad you used that word, because people are saying, where's disclosure? Well, here it is.
Yeah.
There it is. And it has happened. So yeah, I think that is ultimately the purpose of it. And one more thing real quick, another statistic, which blew my mind, because, daylight sightings in and of themselves are pretty rare and low level. But 1/3 of the cases at schoolyards involve landings and or humanoids. So this is like undeniable. And there's photographic evidence and what's called angel hair, a little kind of wispy substance. You may not have heard of it, but it's kind of like cotton candy or spider webs. It dissolves very quickly, and it comes off of UFOs on rare occasions. And boy, some schoolyard cases have that in loads of it. But photographs and landing traces and physiological effects and all the kind of evidence we see.
Well, that brings up an interesting question about that, because at these schoolyards, we get lots of landings. But typically, you hear about seeing crafts in flight or crashed vehicles. Is that as common in other cases to actually have landings that people witness outside of the schoolyards?
Well, landings are not nearly as common. The most common by far, I'm going to say 80 or 90%, is a simple, what we would call a close encounter of the first kind, a sighting. Your average sighting is at night. It's very brief. There's like 4 witnesses. It's an anomalous light. It might stop and hover or dart, and then it's off. And then seeing a structured craft, that's much less common. And seeing something during the day is less common.
Yeah.
There are still a good several thousand landing cases on record, but we're approaching 1 million documented cases of sightings and encounters in general. So yeah, landings are pretty rare, I would say, daylight landings especially. But not as rare as you might think, because here's the problem. Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Very few people will report their sighting, and the closer it gets, the less likely you are to report it. I always ask people when I interview them, so who did you call? Did you call the police? Did you call the Air Force? Did you call MUFON? Like, no, I wouldn't call the police. What's MUFON?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 1 in 100 will report it.
Yeah.
So,
so think of all the things that aren't being reported.
Most of it. And when you think about, MUFON over the years, averages about 20 sightings a day, 5 to 20. You could times that by 100. How many UFO sightings is that per day? Oh, or NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center. And those are just the 2 here in the US. So when you think about it, probably this is hundreds of sightings per day since the modern age of UFOs, 1947 and onward.
Well, those numbers have to be astronomical, Preston, because what I tell you might make you mad, but and I don't want to share the whole story because I've told it on here probably 3 or 4 times already. But I've been interested in this topic, anything supernatural and paranormal since I was a teenager, at least. And when I was about 19, this is going all the way back to 1999. I was working a night shift security job in Richmond, Virginia. And long story short, I went out on top of a roof. I was training a new guy. We went out, and normally I wouldn't have gone out on this roof, on this taller building. It was about 6 floors. I went out on top of the roof. I normally wouldn't have gone, but I needed to because I was training a new guy. And I went out on the roof, and we walked out, and I looked up into the sky, and I saw a blue, kind of like the color of a blue flame. And it was a boomerang shaped, and it just hovered up above the city. And I've sat there and watched it, kind of going, well, what in the world could this be? And my first reaction was, well, it's a comet because it's got like that flame color to it, but it just hovered in the sky. It wasn't going anywhere. And I sat there and stared at it. And by the time I was getting ready to say something about it, it just took off in the flash of an eye. And the guy that I was training, I looked over at him, and by the expression on his face, I could tell that he saw it as well. And we kind of shook our head at each other and made a brief mention of like, wow, that was crazy, or that was weird, or something like that. And then we walked and finished the thing, and we never said anything else about it. I don't know if he lasted because I don't remember running into him again or working with him for very long, but I never reported it. And because it just wasn't, it was like, well, I don't know what I saw. I don't want to, I don't want to make more out of it than what it was. So even someone like me who was kind of into UFOs and the stories and the paranormal and, listening to Art Bell and all that kind of stuff back in those times, I didn't report it. So if I didn't report it, I can only imagine how many other people have had sightings that, like you said, didn't know where to report it. But even if they did, just were like, well, I don't want to make more out of it than I need to, kind of thing.
Yeah, which is so funny to me because I hear that all the time. And people will say, well, I checked the newspapers the next day and there was nothing. I'm like, yeah, of course there's nothing because none of you are reporting it. Yeah. And there's some guy who does report it who's so looking for corroboration. He's like, well, I'm the only one who saw it. I'm like, I don't think so. So it's a real problem. And this is, again, why I'm so mad at our own governments, or shouldn't really blame our governments. They're not fully behind the cover-up. It's the highest levels of the military and the military industrial complex. And,
but that's the purpose, right? Like if you can ridicule people enough and make them out to be crazy, then you can even have people who are interested in the topic not feel like it's maybe best that they don't make a report.
Yeah, which is, understandable. And I wish we had handled this differently, because the Roswell crash, when that happened in 1947, did have a press release.
Yeah.
And it almost changed history if they
Mm-hmm.
retracted it. But if it had gone the other way, just think today, you'd hear the weather on the news and like this many people were taken on board, and this many people, 400 sightings today. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be a completely different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we might have open official contact at that point, but not so sure with our warlike ways and all the divisiveness and the greed and the corruption that's choking our society.
Well, that was one of my questions in my list here is, do you think we'll have full open contact?
Eventually, at some point, because it's true, for one thing. And I think ultimately at some point there will be disclosure because this is a true phenomena. And you can't hide the truth forever. Mm-hmm. You can distort it. You can cover it up. You can lie about it. But you can't destroy it. It's indestructible. And there are so many stars and ETs visiting us. I mean, there's a lot more of them than us. At some point, yes, disclosure and open official contact will happen. I don't know. I'm not holding my breath, honestly, because I just don't know that it would be best for us at this point. I feel like I'm ready. I feel like most people are ready. But on the other hand, until we start electing leaders who are willing to be truthful and transparent and put, the people's interest ahead of their own, I am not so sure that they're willing to, disrupt society to that degree. But they have
because it would be a disruption. I mean, do you think that that's something the general world population could handle if there was disclosure soon, that we could get through it without some kind of fundamental failure of our systems?
Oh, there's going to be a lot of surprise people.
Yeah.
I think, no doubt, for particularly those who are perhaps entrenched in a fundamental skepticism or religious belief system that doesn't have room for things like this.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of in that, I wasn't particularly religious, but I was skeptic. And if something like that had happened, I would have had a hard time with it, because just finding out it was real very peripherally, I didn't even see something and I was upset. So it's gonna upset people if that happens, or when that happens, I should say. But I absolutely think we could handle it. We're very resilient people. Truth is truth. I think it's a mistake to live in delusion and ignorance. That doesn't help anybody.
No.
So I think, we all kinds of stuff. Whether it's look at the Black Death in the Middle Ages. That was hard to deal with. Or the whole nuclear, arms race. Really hard to deal with. But we're still here, and we're slowly progressing and beginning to grow up. I think we can handle it. I think most people are ready.
Yeah.
I just think we're at a point where there's so much going on with the greed and the corruption with our own governments.
Well, there was cover up during the plague as well. We can't get into it another time. But people started figuring out how to stop that from happening, but the church wouldn't allow it.
The church, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what's so hard about telling the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not hard to do. It's a lot easier than lying.
The years might change, but people don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. I got so many questions here. Okay. So you have like an unbelievable amount of books that you have written based on investigations into people's experiences. And I was wanting to know from perhaps, one of your favorite wonderful stories about an interaction with the ET, where it was something beneficial or positive, because we always hear the scary stuff. Like, what's something that's wonderful and a wonderful experience someone had?
Well, most of it in my mind is wonderful, and yes, there's a lot of fear surrounding this subject, and I bought into that. Like, oh my gosh, they're abducting people against their will. These are bug-eyed creatures. no emotions, and they're experimenting on people. And I started getting healing cases right off the bat. I'm like, okay, this is being misrepresented in the media. And having interviewed many hundreds of people, I'm going to say hands down, my favorite is the subject of the book Symmetry, Dolly Safran,
who's with chat. You right now, like in the room.
Yeah. She had this amazing lifelong encounters with ETs, which, did start out scary and confusing for her, like pretty much a lot of people. But at age 14, tired of the missing time and the fear and the confusion, like, am I going crazy? So many people have told me that, I think I'm going crazy. I don't know. But she had an experience at age 14 where UFOs came down by her house in the Florida Everglades. And there were little windows and she could see ETs looking down at her. She's like, oh my God, it's happening again. She saw these little gray guys, freaked out, dove under the bed. The room fills with light. Next thing she knows, it's hours later, it's the next morning. And she's waking up on the floor in someone else's pajamas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Inside out and backwards, too, which, is unusual, but not unheard of by any means. So she had her proof right there. She's like, okay, this is real. These are not even my clothes.
Where did these come from? Yeah.
So I know this happened. And she went into the kitchen, wanted to tell her mom, who hates this subject. Often that is the reaction of a parent, usually not both, but one of them, and not always, but sometimes, this is really difficult for parents.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it was for her mom, who just like, because Dolly's like, I want to tell you I saw something. And it's like, her mom says, shut up. No, no, no. Of course, then the radio comes on and says, UFOs came down over, the Kendall Mall area, which is not far from where they lived. And 2 police officers saw it and blah, blah, blah. And Dolly jumps up, say, oh, look. And her mom, she's hysterical. Her dad walks in. At that point, she didn't know her dad was a contactee as well. This is often generational. And certainly it was in her case. And her dad's like, calm down. Go into the bathroom, where she could actually lock the door and think about what happened to you. Think about it, meditate. And she did. And this is when she full on remembered the missing time.
Oh, wow.
And had a very positive experience. And it's amazing because she remembered being, diving under the bed. Little grays come down. They pull her up in this, what she calls an energy beam, kind of like a beam of light, but different. Through the roof, through the tree, up into a craft, and she recognizes the gray there, the tall gray, who she's met before, and she's freaking out. She throws up. They clean her up. They're like, calm down, you're okay. You remember this, don't you? And she's like, I do. And she hears another voice. It's the ship itself. The ships themselves, the UFOs, are embodied by an entity, a high-level, fifth-dimensional entity. And he's saying, you remember me? And so she's finally calms down. And they take her up into the control room. And long story short, fly her over to Saturn. Well, actually let her do it. To the planet Saturn. And when she told me that, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what Jay Gardner told me. Another
no way.
Yes, it's not uncommon. This happened to Leo Sprinkle and Ray Fowler. This happens to contactees. Usually they'll just take you up in space and like, look, there's the Earth. But if if you have the presence of mind to not completely panic, because if you're panicking, you're going to have missing time. It's going to be cut short. All you're going to remember is being taken on board and maybe a glimpse or two of being laid out and examined, because that's what they're pulling people on board for. It's a healing procedure. But yeah, they took her to Saturn, took her to the moon, flew around it, had this big counseling session with her. And that's when she started to learn how to pilot these craft, which sounds crazy, but it's not.
Sounds amazing. Let's go. Can we go, Dolly? Let's go.
So that was one of the, and of course the experiences went on from there, but I've got so many cases like that. Because like one lady, the first case I investigated, really, the lady had a tumor in her fallopian tubes, a cyst rather. and the ETs removed it right on the day before surgery.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
she went to the doctor and they were completely losing their minds. They're like, you went to a hospital, you had this removed. She's like, no, I didn't. I said, yes, you did. We've got the x-rays, the MRIs. There's fluid here. We know you've had surgery. Stop lying to us. She played dumb. You know, she's like,
yeah.
I
She's not
asked her
going to tell them
why.
it was aliens. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not telling them that. Are you kidding? We'll call the people in the white coats. Which is probably what would have happened, because I've talked to people who've had that happen. They ended up in a mental institution. From their own family put them in there, even though these people had outside witnesses to support their story. That's how disastrous and nefarious this cover-up is. But overall, contact is a positive experience. It's very, very scary when some of these things enter in your room at night and pull you on board. But they're saying, don't be afraid. Have no fear. No harm will come to you. We're not here to harm you. You're okay. But it's really difficult for people in this fear-based society to sort of look at someone that different and be okay with it.
Yeah.
But so overall, it's positive.
On the other spectrum of that, have you had experiences where the ETs were doing something that was nefarious?
Not really, though I will say people have perceived it that way.
Yeah, it was their perception.
Yeah, because when you're in a state of absolute fear and they're holding up an instrument and it's coming towards you, it's very easy to perceive this as a negative experience. And I will say a lot of people were not happy in the initial stages, that it did cause nightmares and anxiety and insomnia and so forth. PTSD, locking the doors at night. And it takes a number of encounters before people realize, well, they just healed me and I'm having all these psychic experiences now and they're teaching me stuff. But some people don't get to that stage, and some do, and they're like just not happy with it. I interviewed a guy in England who's doesn't like it, and I have to respect that. It's his experience. And he says some of it has been very positive. They taught him how to do astral travel like nobody's business. He's super psychic, both he and his wife. But he says they come in at night and scare the living daylights out of him. And once he was pulled on board and they held this needle up to his head and they put it in, he says, Preston, these guys don't know what anesthesia is. It hurt. And that does happen, rarely, pain. In most cases, the vast majority, they will put their hands on your forehead and say, well, and even apologize. When Betty Hill was taken on board and they put a needle in her navel, she screamed, "Oh, you're hurting me." They said afterwards, "We're very sorry. We didn't mean to cause you pain." So the worst I hear is the physical examination, which on occasion, rarely, people do experience pain, which can be, you can burn a person with an ice cube. If you're hypnotized and you call it a coal, you can burn them. So when a person's in terror and they feel something coming towards them, it can hurt, and it's not even actually physically hurting them. So I think sometimes, I'm not going to overlay my own beliefs on anyone's encounter. It's their encounter. But the vast majority of people feel like this was a positive experience and they wouldn't change it for anything. And every now and then I'll interview someone one guy, he's fundamentally religious. And he's like, Preston, these are demons. I'm telling you, that's what they are. And I ended up buying every book on demonology and doing haunted house investigations and my own really terrible ghost investigations with bad ghosts who, it went all the way to possession in like 4 or 5 cases I researched.
Wow.
So that is a real phenomenon, but it's not ET. It really isn't. So we have a tendency to view this phenomenon through the lens of our own belief system and often through the lens of fear. And let's face it, there's disinformation and misinformation and lies and what's called MILABs, military abductions, which are faked, but made to look real and terrify you, scare the pants off of you. But in my research, and I think this is backed up by other people who really focus on the onboard experience, this is not nefarious. As I said, the worst that happens is a physical examination, which can be very scary. But if you're not in complete terror, that's when they start talking to you. First, they're trying to do a checkup and heal you. Yeah. That was the subject of my first book, UFO Healings.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm getting all excited about this. I'm just talking in my own minute.
No, I was actually getting ready to ask that. So if there's not a nefarious reason, what is going on with all the shots and probes and so on and so forth? So that's healing. They're checking you over and with the purpose of healing.
Exactly. That is one of the primary reasons people are pulled on board, particularly contactees who are followed through their family lines, and the ETs are upholding their genetics, which are being damaged, by solar radiation from our failing magnetic fields and pollution and fluoride and all the chemicals and the drugs. And they're doing their best to uphold the best of our genetics. That is one of the primary reasons, and that is one of the reasons people are being physically examined. And the healing is.
Because I know one of the, like you had said, one of like the side effects, I guess you could say, is afterwards is people have more psychic abilities. Do you think that that's just a side effect of them having that interaction, or do you think that the ETs are also doing things that are allowing that to be unlocked?
Yeah, initially I thought it was a side effect, and I've changed my mind.
Yeah,
because it's so consistent, and I've got specific cases where the ET said, "This is our gift to you for working with us." In that exact phrase, in 2 cases, it was the exact same phrase. "This is our gift to you." And that's another commonality that's true with almost every contactee, is a profound psychic ability. Mm-hmm. And this sometimes comes before, people are psychic as little kids, but certainly afterwards. It's a two-way street, but I've come to realize that is one of their missions, one of their goals, one of their agendas, is to wake us up. Because people come away from contact first with the ability to heal, Reiki or hands-on healing, or just an interest in medicine or ecology or environmentalism or animal rights. But beyond that, they come away with astral projection or remote viewing, out-of-body experiences. Mediumship is huge. They start seeing shadow people, channeling, having clairvoyance, human levitation, physical levitation. I've got a dozen cases, 20 or 30 actually, where people will spontaneously levitate and they start levitating physically. Oh. I ended up writing a whole book on levitation because we can fly. Who knew? But it's very well attested. It's been proven in scientific laboratory settings multiple times. It's in every culture. We can levitate. And the ETs are teaching people how to do that. I put out a video on that, and this guy called me from Europe on the edge of tears. He says, "You're the first person I could find. I've been searching for years because I had this." He had this really profound encounter with a close-up UFO and started levitating in his room, and it freaked him out. It's like, "I'm so glad, you put this information out there."
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's a definite, I'm not sure I would call it side effect, but it's a goal. This is one of the reasons that they're contacting people, to wake us up to. They're not supernatural abilities. They're natural.
Exactly.
This is nothing paranormal. It's not breaking the laws of the universe.
Innate abilities, because really we're just energy.
All right. Exactly. Well, let's take this real quick for a moment. We're zooming right along in this conversation. As I figured, there's so much to talk about, and try to get to it all is not going to be possible. But if you're just joining us, if you've jumped in since we started here, we are joined tonight by Preston Dennett, and there's a link at the top of chat if you're with us live, where you can check out his website at prestondennett.weebly.com, and you can buy all of the books at Amazon.com. And just as a reminder, what are we down to now? We're a little over about a week and a half from Christmas. So there is still time. There is still time. I'm glad there is, because I still need a little bit of time to go out and do your holiday shopping. It's all right on a corner. So go check out, some of the books out there on Amazon from Preston. Because there's a lot of very interesting topics that you can check out. So If you're listening to us later on podcast or over on YouTube, I'll have the links listed down below for you to click on and check that out. All right.
So we did have a question before we get too far from that subject again. Apple Burrito wanted to know, uphold the DNA to what purpose?
To keep people healthy, to bring out the best of human development. If you look at who the contactees are, because I started looking, I'm like, why are some people and not others? What is going on here? And it was a very interesting pattern I found, because it's evenly divided between men and women. And it certainly isn't dependent on your ancestry or your blood type or anything like that, religion, political affiliation, or geographic area. It's all over the world. We know this. And we do find that they are following family lines going back. They do seem to be very much attracted to people who are psychic. Mm-hmm. But people who are contactees are people who are doing good work for humanity in some capacity. Mm. So I found a lot of contactees are teachers. They are animal rights activists, human rights activists, environmentalists, doctors, nurses, musicians, artists. They are helping those who help others. Those are the people who are being healed. Those are the people who are being contacted. So basically what they're trying to do is help us in a way without coming down and solving our problems, because that's up to us. They've made that very clear, because people have asked them over and over again. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a case in Austria in the 1950s, early 1950s, where the guy's just crying. He's like, come down, our governments are so corrupt. You have to help us. And they said, we can't. You are the one in the position to help, not us. We can only, help you to a certain extent. And I've heard that in different phrasing, even with the word karma thrown in there by the ETs, that it's up to us to help ourselves. They can't do it, but they are helping those who help others. That's exactly what they told a couple that I interviewed who were contacted in Sedona. And he was healed of carpal tunnel syndrome and a bad knee. And, they had this amazing encounter where they were invited on board. It was very positive. They were mostly human-looking ETs. And she asked them, where are you from? And they basically said, oh, it's not important. She wouldn't understand. But she's like, why don't you just come down? And they said, we can't do that. We're helping those who help others. You have to solve your problems. Mm-hmm. And they are helping others. He's a social worker. They live in Hawaii, and he helps people with their houses. And she's an herbal healer, very effective. So I see that over and over and over again. That's why they're upholding our genetics, to basically, because we're now at a point where we can completely destroy ourselves and the planet and each other, everything. That happened around, the nuclear age, 1940s. And that's when they came in huge numbers. The modern age of UFOs and the nuclear age coincide exactly. Mm-hmm. And
not a coincidence.
Yeah. That's when they said, okay, you know what? Here it goes again. They're going to destroy themselves. We've got to do something. What can we do? We're going to do what we can. Yeah. Their mission, their agenda is one of it's healing, teaching, informing, warning, and raising consciousness and psychic ability. That's it in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. If you're taken on board and you can listen to beyond, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you. They're going to tell you, stop using nuclear weapons. Nuclear proliferation must stop. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The greed and corruption is choking your society. Mm-hmm. Stop chopping down the forests. Mm-hmm. You're polluting your own water, your own food. Yeah. Stop killing each other. Love is the answer. That's what they told Betty Andreasson. Love is the answer for humankind. All the answers to your problems can be found in nature. Direct quote from a gray alien. Mm-hmm. So that is the ET agenda. That's why they're here. That's why they're contacting us.
Well, that brings up an interesting question I have, going back. Well, I was going to say to the end of the Cold War, we might be seeing a new version of that. But I've heard quite a few people, speculate on extraterrestrials possibly interfering and stopping that button from being pressed. From the research you've done and what you've read and written about, do you think they would have intervened and stopped a nuclear war?
I hope so, but I don't think we can count on it. I mean, there's some indication that they have intervened to a limited extent here and there. But, Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened.
That's true.
And, Dolly Safran, the contactee who I wrote about her case in Symmetry, asked them, and they said, listen, if we had stopped that, would you have learned? No. You have to learn. Yeah. The ETs are not killing people en masse. So it always kind of like puzzles me when people are like, oh, they're evil. I'm like, no, it's us. We're overlaying our own cultural values onto strangers who we've been taught to fear. No, I don't know that we can count on that. They might. They've certainly intervened to a limited extent. And I would point to the Malmstrom incident in March of 1967, where they shut down nuclear missiles. And I got to interview one of the guys. Oh my God. Wow. Every now and then you get to, who came forward. He was an unknown witness, Mel Hansen. And boy, what a treat, because every now and then you get to talk to a whistleblower. And this guy's like, I want to do my part. And if I can, real brief, describe what he said.
Yeah, for sure. I'm interested.
So cool. It's such an interesting case, which is really well known. But he was there. He was, worked on maintaining these missile sites, which are all independent systems. It can't shut down all at once. One could, but all of them, no, that's impossible. UFOs showed up and shut them all down. He was at one of the sites, and this UFO showed up. It's at night. And he's the only one above ground. His whole team is below ground maintaining it. He's in the Jeep with a security officer. And this UFO shows up. He says it was a dark mass blocking out the stars. Couldn't tell quite how large or quite how high up, which I liked to hear because, you can't tell how big something is if you don't know how high up it is, or vice versa. So he's like, well, it's blocking stars, and it looked pretty close. Everything became deathly quiet, and the system shut down, the whole electric power. He says it instantly went back on because there's a fail-safe, and it went back up on battery power, and that failed. And it went back to a generator, which put it back online, and that failed. So 2 fail-safes failed.
Wow.
And at that point, of course, he's calling the people back at the base proper, saying, we've got a situation. And they said, do not get out of the Jeep. You are to stay where you are. We'll be there in less than an hour, because this is way the heck out there. These are very widely spaced. And of course, he gets out and looks up because he wants to see it, but it just moves off. Totally silent. Security shows up. It's to leave everything, go to base. And they were all separated and questioned all night long. Said, you didn't see anything. One word, you will lose everything. Don't tell your family. Don't tell each other. Never talk about it. It didn't happen. And he obeyed that, except for occasionally on a camping trip. He was best friends with one of the guys. And they would talk about it out in the wilderness when no one's around. But he died. He died, and they all died. And he's old, and he's like, you know what? He saw it on Unsolved Mysteries, or talking about Malmstrom. He's like, oh, well, I guess I can talk about it. He's like, I don't care. I'm talking.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So, they will intervene in that sort of a way, which was a clear message. I'm sure the folks at the top brass were like, oh, my God, this is horrible. They're shutting down our missiles. What could they do? But to me, from my perspective, it's a clear warning. Like, what are you doing? Are you stupid? This could kill everybody, including yourself. And we have the capacity to stop this. Don't, stop messing around. So I think that's, they are intervening, but I wouldn't count on them stopping a nuclear war. We made our bed.
Yeah, it's like they want to see us succeed, but they can't really overstep the boundaries of free will. They can't come in and make up our free will minds for us.
Yeah, I hope if they see us jumping off a cliff to our death, they will, like a parent, say, grab them.
Yeah.
But like a parent knows, you can't tie your kids' shoes. You can't, spoon feed them. They have to do it, or they will never make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. It's been something that's interesting, especially with all of this. Well, follow the news. Everything's coming back around again. I was reading a story today about Nostradamus predictions. And the article was talking about how last year's at the end of the article essentially said, well, you don't have to worry about it if you're too scared because last year's predictions didn't come true. And the one that it listed was the beginning of World War III. And I said, have you not been watching the news?
Terrifying.
Yeah, it's curious. I've always been curious about that. And that story, that's absolutely wonderful that you were able to interview and have a discussion with him about that, because I've heard about that story many, many times. And of course, you mentioned earlier about In Search Of, and I think between In Search Of and Unsolved Mysteries, I think that's where a lot of people got their start in this stuff. So
I love interviewing people who are having onboard experiences, because that's the heart of the phenomena.
Yeah.
But hearing some of these military witnesses is so amazing. Like there was another guy, Ray Sachs, who was on the USS Clamagore, which had nuclear-tipped torpedoes. It's a submarine. And back in 1971, he's on the deck. It's traveling on the surface up the East Coast when a USO shows up and paces the Clamagore for 15 minutes. It's this giant object right underwater next to the submarine, which, can't happen if it's another sub. You can't approach within a quarter mile. That's a near miss of anything. And he's up there with another petty officer. He's an electronics engineer. And they're like freaking out. The sonar room doesn't see him. The captain, the second commander on deck, and all the major officers, the high-ranking officers, come up for a few minutes because they want to look at it. This thing came in at like 100 knots from the stern, paced it for 15 minutes, and darted off at like 80 knots in another direction and was gone. And the second in command turns to the commander, says, "Sir, how would you like me to report this event in the log?" And the commander turns to the second in command and says, "Officers who report this kind of event in the log do not move up in rank." So it wasn't recorded in the log. And Ray Sachs, again, an older man, said, I really think people should know about this. I'm like nervously asking him, "Did you sign an NDA?" He's like, "No, I didn't." They told me not to talk, but I didn't sign anything.
Yeah.
And they told him, you are not to talk about this. He goes below deck. Every single man on there was running up to him. "What happened? What did it look like?" So it was news on the Clamagore for a long time.
Well, and that brings us right around to what we were talking at the beginning with these congressional hearings. And I think that was one of the good things that came out of it was the fact that people, at least now, if they didn't know before, they know now that well-trained professional military people are having consistent experiences with these things. And, we're over here in Virginia, Preston. So I'm very familiar with the Naval Air Station and lived in that area for quite a bit of my life. But, it was amazing to hear, same thing, like essentially these fighter pilots are having to have briefings and discussions before they go up in air about what they're going to do because of all the UFOs that are up there and how they're going to make sure that they don't run into them. And stories like that, I think really just kind of like made me think like, wow, this is something big that's happening.
Yeah, we're hearing 1% of what's going on at the military. Not even 0.5, 0.0. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's
0.001.
Exactly.
Can you imagine? This must be huge at the highest levels of military. That's probably all they're really concentrating on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So we have about 30 minutes left, and we have talked a lot about UFOs and aliens.
So much more.
However, there's a whole nother topic of things that we wanted to talk about. So maybe we could spend the last little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we need to get into it, or there's going to be some people get angry at us if we don't.
The out-of-body experiences. And the first question that we had, because we weren't sure, was that, is astral projection or travel the same thing as out-of-body experience? Is it two different terminologies for the same thing, or is it different things?
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the experience of traveling out of your body in what we would call the dream body, the astral body. You know, it goes by different names: the desire body, the occult body, different terms, but it's the same exact thing. It's the experience of being separated from the physical in another body that can fly and move through walls and go to the other side and visit what we would call the heavenly realms and go all the way, I mean, higher dimensions, depending on how good you get at it.
Yeah. When you were talking about the levitation, I kept thinking anybody who's had a dream about flying knows you can levitate.
Yeah. A flying dream is probably a half remembered out-of-body experience because we all do it every night. The trick is remembering. This is as safe as sleeping. It's not hard to do. I learned how to do it. And after my mom died tragically at a young age, 49, in 1984. And, you know, 86 and 87 rolled around. And I was having dreams of her coming and visiting me. I didn't believe in life after death, so I thought I was losing my mind because I knew it was her. I just knew it on some level. And that's what got me into this subject. I found Robert Monroe's book. And if you know anything about OBEs, you know about Robert Monroe, who wrote Far Journeys and Journeys Out of the Body and The Ultimate Journey. And basically, it was all about his experiences, but he told you how to do it. So I did his exercises, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. Oh my God. The first experience I had, I flew out of my body. I was crossing my bedroom into the hallway, into the bathroom. I'm like, oh my God, I am doing this. This is real. There is life after death. This is insane. My family thought I'd lost my mind because I'm like, UFOs are real and I'm going out of body. They're like, oh no. Poor
aliens going out of the body. He's going to the mental ward.
Thankfully, they came around, all of them. So, but yeah, that was tough for them, probably more than me in some ways.
Yeah, because you were excited, and they were like, "Oh, good."
So this is something we talk. This is something we talk about with medium Jenny Lee quite a bit when she's doing her mediumship streams on here. But you said earlier, but just to clarify, anybody can do it.
Yes. Yep. It's just a matter of physical relaxation, mental relaxation, and doing visualizations and affirmations. And you'll feel if you get through it, you'll probably feel what's called the vibratory state, which feels kind of like an electric shock, mild or perhaps severe. It was severe for me. I was told it was mild and it wasn't. So that kind of shocked me. And so I'm going to say it can be a real, honest to God, shaking experience. And you'll feel perhaps energy rushing through you and then you pop right out. But yeah, anyone can do it. And it's perfectly safe. The main obstacles are fear, laziness, and skepticism. People think it's very scary, and it is. I mean, a couple of times I thought I had died when I did it. I popped out. I'm like, oh no, I'm dead. I was not happy.
Can I get back in there? Let me in.
And laziness, yeah, you got to do the exercises. And skepticism, people don't think, I couldn't do that. This is for yogis and, enlightened masters. No. You can do this. And you're not going to get lost out of your body. You're not going to get possessed. You're not going to go too far out. It's as safe as sleeping. And in fact, I've documented some 30 cases of people who are physically healed as a result. And by that, I mean, honest to God, healing of multiple sclerosis or sarcoidosis or colds and flus and cuts and you name it, healing. It's a very healing experience. You can go to a healing temple. On the other side, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. you get to visit your deceased loved ones. That's why I did it. I wanted to see my mom so bad.
Yeah.
I would pop out. I'd be like, I did it again. I did it again. I get right back in because strong emotion will pull you back in.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a year because every time I'd pop out, I'd be like, I did it. Whoosh, back in.
Yeah.
Pop out. I did it. Whoosh, right back in. I'm like, well, darn it. This is. So finally I popped out. I'm like, calm down.
Yeah. Yeah. No freaking out. You got to calm down. Take a breath.
I was able to extend it to, 30 seconds and then a minute and then 2 minutes and then, upwards of that. I mean, you can stay out all night. But sometimes, if you're out on the other side, you'll feel the pull. You're like, uh-oh, time to go back.
Mm-hmm.
But I did meet my mom. She popped in, because I always pop out of my bed, like, Mom, 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 Mom. I'm here. I've met you halfway. Where the heck are you? And finally, she showed up one day. Young. She looked like 25. When I pop out, you see I don't have a whole lot of hair.
Yeah.
I lost it pretty early. I'm so sad about that. But what are you going to do? But when I'm out of body, it all comes back.
Your hair pops out too.
Yep.
Well, we
have super buff.
You haven't been able to see my video yet, Preston, but that brings me great joy because I'm in that club as well.
Yeah, but I met my mom. She took me to the other side. Honest to God, and I'm not a religious guy. I said that, but. Boy, seeing the other side could make you religious because it is, I don't know what else to call it, but the heavenly realms. The light permeates everything. It's very sparkly. It's made of light. And in fact, you can go to source, the light that they talk about in near-death experiences. You can go there and soak in the light. It's amazing. But my mom took me on this tour and, it's very garden-like, green fields, forests. We flew over this field and landed next to a river. She's like, go in the water, go in the water. I'm like, what? She's like, go in. And you can feel the water, but it doesn't get you wet. It's the strangest thing. It kind of rolls over you and you come out and you're perfectly clean. It's super cool. I mean, it's just amazing.
Wow.
There's little pathways and benches. And, over the years, I've lost a lot of friends and family members. And you always get to see them. It's amazing. Sometimes it took a while, a few of them. But usually, my nephew died. And literally hours after he passed, I popped out of my bed. I'm going down this tunnel. I'm like, I'm going to go see him. I know it. And I was passing other people who had just recently died who were still in the tunnel. I'm like, wow, this is people knew this. Boy, they would try harder because it's amazing. And I popped out in this room, which was like a waiting room kind of. And there was a greeter, a lady, these are all dead people. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And this lady's smiling at me. And I'm like, hi, my name's Preston. I'm looking for my nephew. His name is James Dennett. I don't suppose you have any idea where he could be. And she smiled. She's, just this beautiful lady with dark hair, a round face. And then she's like, oh yeah. Turn around. He's right behind you.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh, my God. So I turned around and I instantly looked up. I'd forgotten that he's, 6'3". I hadn't seen him in a while. I'm like, James. And he was robust. His chest was thrust out. He's glowing with this aura of just light. And he's smiling from ear to ear. He grabs my hands. He says, I love you. I'm like, James, I love you too. I had so many questions I wanted to ask him, but he's just smiling, looking at me, and he says, Preston, I watched your video. Like, what? It's like, yeah, that one you did with the blue and the yellow UFO. I'm like, oh, yeah, that one. It's like, you're doing a really good job, and this is really important work. You don't know, but this is really important. You need to keep doing this. I was planning on keeping doing it, but I just felt such overwhelming love and gratitude at that point that the emotion... if you let your emotions get away from you, you slide off that sort of narrow focus that you need to be on to do this. And I got pulled back. But boy, that was so cool because I saw him, after he died, and I was able to call his mom and everybody in the family, like, listen, he's real, he's there, he's fine, he's happy. Oh, it was just one of the most amazing experiences.
It's beautiful.
I can't recommend this enough. Don't believe me, check it out and you will know, because you can believe it or not. But until you have this experience, then you'll know. And it is so worth it. And it's not that hard. It took me a month and a half of doing the exercises before I had my first full-on one. Mm-hmm. And then I would do it every weekend when I could sleep late, because we all have to work. It's not like, I could spend all my time just meditating in some cave. And I wish I could, honestly. But,
well, I mean, that brings up a good question. When you are going out of body, and once you get to the point where you are able to spend a lot of time out of body at night, does that affect the physical sleep that you're getting? Do you wake up tired in the morning, or no?
No. I've had a few people who said, well, I get tired. I'm like, really? Most, because I've taught this, and no, it gives you energy. You come away like walking on air. In fact, it's very much connected to physical levitation, which I haven't done, by the way.
Working on it.
But yeah, you feel like you're walking on air, and I come back energized, absolutely energized. And no, I don't feel the least bit tired. I get I'm just talking about it. I'm all wired right now. Like, oh my God. Because this is my favorite subject. UFOs is super interesting, but it's not us. I mean, it's a human experience. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But this is something that's about us.
Well, just to bring this in, because I've discussed this with you a little bit, Jenny, but I don't know. But for your experiences, would you say that because you do the mediumship, but would you how does that compare to the out of body experience or the astral projection for you?
Well, I was going to say that I have the same experience with mediumship that you do with out of body experiences. A lot of mediums get really exhausted after they do readings, and they're tired and they might have a headache and they have to rest. And I have the same thing that happens for your out of body experiences. I get so jazzed up and energized, and I'm just like, I can't go to sleep afterwards. And so that's some similarities there. And I think, and I can't speak for every other medium because, I don't know how they're going about it, but I think, and it might be true for you as well, it's connecting to that source energy. It's being in that light and that love is what gives you that energetic boost,
Totally
and
agree.
a lot of the mediumship kind of work that I do, it does lead me in that direction. And I do have that kind of connection when I'm doing the work. So I think that's why you and I are getting jazzed up and other people are getting sleepy.
Yeah. And I think if you block it, because it's a lot of energy flowing through you, that can cause, some problems.
Yeah.
Or difficulties. I wouldn't say it's dangerous in any way. I have had some experiences where I'm like, well, that's unpleasant. Once I popped out of body and there was these, lost souls. These were like murderers or thugs who were up to no good. I just popped out of my body and I'm exploring the house. Usually I have a plan, and that usually involves going to the other side where all the action is.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just want to explore around the house and walk through the wall and like, wow, look at everything glowing, and it's just neat, right?
There's a Ouija board in there.
You can see into walls, by the way. But I went into the front yard, and there was these lost souls, earthbound souls. 3 guys who were young, but they were dead. And they were not nice people. And they saw me and they made a beeline right for me. And they were like 100 feet away. And they're floating, they come zooming towards me. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
In the books they're like, project love and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going back because I wasn't ready. Since then I've explored what we would call definitely the hellish realms. Because I'd read about it. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, why can't I? Anyone can do this. And once you build up your arsenal and, you learn all these tricks and how to stay awake and how to see and how to move and how to get, fulfill an intention, which is very simple. You just intend it. It's all willpower and intention and focus. But I went to some of these lower realms and it is different. The very high realms are very nature and it's glorious and beautiful. And there are animals, and I mean, it's gorgeous. You can't be in a bad mood. But there are lower realms, and to to me, this is my experience. It's not lakes of fire so much, but there are people, depending on how low you get, because you can get to very dark places where people are locked into themselves, and you cannot get their attention. They're crying, they're in despair, they're afraid, or they're locked into a negative emotion usually.
Yeah.
There's a level right above that where people just died and they're kind of like milling around and not fully sure, or they know they're dead, but it looks like a mall. I mean, it looks like it's a very urban setting, and they're in these rooms that are very much like hotels, kind of. And I do this over and over again. And one time I'm like, okay, I'm just going to dive a little deeper here, because it was filled with people, and they're just sitting on tables talking and, just kind of chatting. I'm like, okay. And I started asking people, are you dead? And the guy's like, yeah, of course I am. And I'm like, okay. And I saw this little kid. I'm like, are you dead? And he gave me this look like I'm nuts. He said, I am. We all are. Oh, okay. And I found this group of ladies sitting at a table, and I walked up to them. I'm like, can I ask you a dumb question? Are you dead? And they gave me the same stupid look, like, who is this idiot? So said, yes, of course we're dead. And I said, well, I'm not. And everyone stopped talking. There's 100 people around me. Everyone stopped talking, and every head swivels and looks at me.
Wow.
With this like expression of like, who the F are you? And I'm like, I'm going. That's who I am. Bye.
See you later.
Well, it was clear that this was not something I should have said.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so in other words, first level of hell is a mall.
Well, it's, there's a very, very dark, my friend Roger died of alcoholism, and I went to him, and he was in the dark, screaming his head off. He's like, I'm not ready. I'm lost. Help, help, help. And I'm like, I'm gonna help you. And I got pulled back from the emotion, because he was my best friend. He died of alcoholism. And I prayed for him and found him on that second level. And ultimately found him up in the heavenly realms in a hospital. But once I went to, again, this mall-like setting, and there was this tall black guy kind of milling around. I was asking people the same dumb question, are you dead? And like, we all are. This was in the middle of the whole COVID thing. And it was clear that a lot of people were being pulled over to the other side. But I saw this guy, and he looked like he was ready for the heavenly realm, because he had this beautiful aura. And I walked up to him. I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's looking at me like, who are you? And I'm like, I could take you to the other side, because this is something that you will be inducted into doing if you get good at this, because it's a problem. There are so many people who are stuck.
Yeah.
And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I know where it is. It's, I can take you there if you're interested. He's like, really? Okay. And I'm like, all you have to do is grab my hand. And he hesitates, because I'm a guy, he's a guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's, just take my hand. Come on. He's like, okay. Because he's a big black guy, and I'm this short, little, skinny white guy.
With hair, though, with hair.
Yeah,
lots of hair. Yeah.
Well, not that short, 5'9.5". I'm not going to give up that 3/4. I'm not going to give that up. But he like 6 foot.
With hair, you can round it up, 5'10".
So I grab his hand and off we go. And how I get there is, once you know where it is, I mean, but I kind of just go straight up. And then it started getting really colorful and beautiful. And you can tell there, because the light just embraces you, and the love. And it would bring tears to your eyes to know that what's waiting for us is the best place ever.
Yeah.
And he got there, and he'd let go of my hand, and like they always do. I try to track them, but I read about this. This is a problem. They're off on their way. So I've done that a number of times. The first time was this little girl who had been murdered. Oh, broke my heart. But I read about other people doing this. I'm like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Take me to someone I can help. And I pulled this little girl over to the other side. I'm like, wow. Because there's a lot of books on this, and there's some people who are really good at it, better than me. And this is something that you can do. It's so rewarding. Oh my God, it's
well,
amazing.
That's good to know, because that's been a discussion we've had before when it comes to the mediumship with ghost investigations and stuff like that, and mediums who, it's kind of become a question that, or at least it was for a while, I know, discussing about whether or not it was ethical to move on. A spirit kind of, I don't know, with the fear that maybe we didn't know what we were doing, So, but you're saying it's okay.
It's up to I would think it's still going to be up to the individual's person, whether they're going to really
want to go or not,
or they're ready.
Yeah, well, I think that it is ethical, and it almost behooves you to do the right thing. If a person is lost, and you have the ability to point the right direction.
Yeah.
Because I had spirits in my house. I moved into this house, and some of the contactees I know are mediums. And they're like, "You have a ghost in your house. Are you aware of that?" I'm like, well, that's why the light keeps going on. Well, maybe I do. And so I popped out of my body once, and that was my goal. Because usually, I'm out of there. There are better things to do than to hang around on Earth. And so I'm exploring the house. I'm like, well, I don't see anybody. I'm going from room to room to room to room to room. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Go into the bathroom, and in the reflection of the mirror, I see someone standing behind me in the hallway. And I'm like, whoa. Because, it's startling. I turned around, and there's this guy who's a little shorter than me. He's heavy set, not fat by any means, but, a shorter, heavy set guy with a round face, dark hair, a little bit of stubble. And he's like, so I come up to him, I'm like, what's your name? And he says, my name is Mac. I'm like, well, Mac, don't know what you're doing hanging around my house, but I think you should go. There's another, go to the other side. What are you doing here? You can't stay in my house. And I grabbed him by the arm. And when you're not physical and another person is not physical, they feel physical. At least that was my experience. And so I grabbed his arm and I pulled him out and found another guy. He says his name is Bill. Pulled him out. And there's an end note to this because it was really cool. A couple of, I don't know, it was a month or two later, about not that far. I went to the other side, the lower realms. But it's, it goes up to these hotels that are gorgeous with, marble floors and beautiful plants and paintings. And it's just beautiful. And I'm walking through there. I'm like, wow, this is not quite the heavenly realms, but it's darn close. and there's people there and everyone's happy. That's where I found my dad one day. I'd been looking for him for years. But I'm walking along, and this little kid is looking at me. And I'm thinking, well, gosh, he looks familiar, but I don't, I don't know who he is. And our paths are kind of crossing, and we get closer and closer. And he looks at me. He's like, hi, my name is Mac, and I love you. Oh. I'm like, Mac, I love you too. But he had, regressed himself. You can be, you can regress yourself to a little kid if you want.
Be whatever
I've done
you want.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, wait, I'm little.
Wow, so you can take kind of whatever form you want, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Wear any clothes you want. You can fulfill any fantasy you want to. Because you can create thought forms. In the beginning, I would create feasts of food because, when you pop out of your body, it's called the desire body for a reason. And if you have any repressions that you haven't dealt with, you're going to deal with them there. And apparently I had some anger issues. I didn't know, because I would just lose my mind and I'd get really angry. And I'd start wrecking everything, knocking things over, and punching. And then I had some food issues. I don't have an eating problem, but, apparently we all have issues. And so I'd create feasts of food, of my favorite foods: chicken nuggets, brownies, sour cream and onion potato chips.
Were you the little kid when you were eating all of this?
No, I was a full-on adult, but it was fun. It's funny because you eat, you can eat the ice cream and it you can take a whole bag of potato chips and guzzle them, and it disappears kind of down your throat. And it's not fully satisfying because you don't fill up, but you can sort of taste it. It's amazing. And then I had lust issues, and I won't get into the details. But it's a big part of it. And you
just save that for a different kind of podcast, Preston.
Trust me, you'll encounter that as well. And it's all kinds of fun. It really is. It's amazing.
So we did have a question earlier about this. On this like a skeptical kind of note, which is perfectly fine to ask these kind of questions.
Sure.
How
Absolutely.
do you know that those types of experiences are real versus artificially generated in some way by something else?
Well, that's certainly a question that you will ask when it's happening to you the first few times. You're like, gosh, is this a dream? Because it looks real. And I would go to people I know and they would not see me. And you're feeling, gosh, am I making this up? And finally, I went to a place I'd never been physically, near my house, dove under, there's the LA River. I lived in a condo at the time. And I went down into this river and I'm flying along it and I saw soil filling up the cement banks with plants growing out of it and trash. I'm like, well, that's got to be fake because this is a cement river. There's no way plants could possibly be growing here. But I know exactly where this is. I'm going to drive here. And went back into my body, woke up. I'm like, had my coffee.
Yeah.
And then went there. I'm like, oh my God. That's there's something really eerie and cool about seeing something you saw out of body first. So I verified it to myself, but I had the devil of a time proving it to people. Finally, I'm going to go see Dolly, who was in chat. I'm like, I'm going to go out of body and just visit her. And I didn't tell her.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say, did you give her a warning?
No, probably rude of me, but it is what it is. I'm sorry. I just did it. You don't invade people's privacy by any means because that's wrong. And you just got to have a high moral code if you want to succeed at this. But I just wanted to see her. And I popped over. She's in Florida. I'm in California. And I go over and I see her standing in this garage. Well, first I see this other guy. I'm like, what's your name? He's like, my name is Norman. I'm like, well, where's Dolly? Turned out this was a ghost that was following her around.
Oh, wow.
But he's like, points to the door. He's like, she's over there. And she comes through the door and she's on the phone and she's not looking at me. And I'm like, hey, uselessly, because I know she's not going to see me. But she turns around, her eyes get really wide and she sees me.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh my God. And she says, she looks straight at me and says, I can't talk now. I'm being robbed. She's on the phone. Something, oh my God, she's being robbed. How horrible. And pulled me back into my body. And we were I was interviewing her for the book. We'd become really good friends. And she calls me up the next day and she's just talking. And I'm like, well, I guess she wasn't robbed, because if I were robbed, that'd be the first thing I'd say. I'm losing my mind again. It makes you doubt. You vacillate. But then she says, I saw you last night. You came to my house. I'm like, you did? What did you say? Because I heard you say something. And she says, oh, well, I was on the phone. You came in the middle of the night. I happened to be up. and I was on the phone with this guy. His name is Rob. And I said, I can't talk now. I'm with Rob. I'm like, oh, well, thank God.
Oh, with Rob, not being robbed.
Oh.
So I misunderstood her.
Oh,
thank goodness.
And to end this story real quick, a week later, I'm in bed and I'm like, why is my room filling with light? What is going on? And I wake up. I'm lying in bed. She woken up in the middle of the night. Well, I'd just gone to bed, really. And there's Dolly standing next to me, leaning over my bed, grinning from ear to ear with this golden aura that filled the whole room. I'm a full-on apparition. And we've since shared out-of-body experience. I mean, she took me on a journey a couple of times.
Oh, wow.
She's really good at it.
So you can go with another person.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
So that's how I know it's real. But yeah, you can make up stuff and absolutely have your own fantasy. But it's all, dreams are real, by the way. We call them imaginary, but it's a real experience, and that will persist. It's still there. It's going to last longer than the physical world. So it's kind of a trick question. And in fact, so is astral projection, because really we're returning home to our source. Right now, we're projecting down into a physical body. That's the projection. When you're astral projecting, you're going home, and you will know it the first second you get there. You're like, wow, this is where we come from. This is where we belong. This is great. I never want to go. But of course you have to, because you're down here on Earth in school and learning your lessons.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll learn that it's real, but it can be a journey.
Well, we've almost come to the end of the night here, but we had a question in chat, and I kind of wanted to roll that over into the last thing I want to ask you too. Apple Burrito asked, how long it takes to learn to do something like this, but I also wanted to throw in there. I know that you have a book about this as well, and you've talked before about teaching others how to do that. So briefly, how long can someone expect to have to do? We touched that a little bit before, and what kind of things are included in your book that they can go out to buy to begin to try to do this?
Well, how long does it take? I'll start with that. It can happen overnight, or it might take you up to a year. I've had people who are like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I've been trying for a year. So it depends on a number of factors. How much effort you put forth is a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing the exercises correctly, because physical relaxation is not easy for some people.
Yeah.
And you really have to learn how to do that.
Some people really struggle.
Yeah. I mean, because they sleep with, they're grinding their teeth and they're tossing and turning, their fists are clenched. You have to learn how to relax. And then you have to learn how to mentally relax. And that's also not super easy.
Yes. Getting your brain to shut up is very hard.
Yeah. But if you put the effort forth and you really got, the willpower and the desire and the intention and the focus, it shouldn't take you much more than a month or two. And if you do these exercises and you meditate on this for an hour a day, which is a long time to, ask people to do it, 10 minutes if you don't have an hour, but yeah, an hour a day, you'll be, it's going to happen. It's all about persistence. So I wouldn't expect it to take more than a couple of months. It took me a month and a half, but immediately I started having pre-lucid dreams and doubling my dream recall. I just took a geometric curve right into it. So it doesn't take that long. And my book does cover how to do this. I've covered it on my YouTube channel as well. Okay. I'm going to put out another book shortly. But my book covers my experiences from when it started in late, about 88 or so, all the way up to 2001. And then the next book will be from the next 20 years or so, of 25 of my experiences. But yeah, of meeting spirit guides and, going to the other side and rescuing lost souls and meeting your, enlightened masters and just really cool stuff. The stuff, learning about past lives. It's a big, big, big part of this.
Oh, wow. Well, that's something we would like to get into.
One of my favorite subjects, yeah.
Because we have done past life, we will do, and we have experience doing past life regressions here. So that is something, a good topic that we could maybe discuss at some time down the road. But what is the name of that book for people who are interested in trying to learn how to have out-of-body experiences?
Called Out-of-Body Exploring, A Beginner's Approach.
And I just put the link in the chat. You scroll up just.
I really lay it down. A lot of books make it sound so easy, but if you're not familiar with it, there's definitely a pathway to it. And I named the obstacles, it's fear, skepticism, and laziness. Overcome that, do the exercises, and you're on your way.
Excellent.
And then you just want to
the last thing to the point. Okay.
You want to relax to the point where you feel heaviness or lightness or dizziness or the vibratory state. And then you want to relax mentally till you start seeing images and, your thoughts will turn into pictures. And then you just got to do the visualizations, which is anything involving movement, like rolling over in bed or on a swing set or an elevator or running down a path or spinning in place. And you're there. It's not hard to do. It's a 3-4 step process.
And CMC Air Boss had made a statement earlier, and I wanted to bring that up real quick before we start winding up here. But he said, Preston is lucky. I wake up after a traveling session and feel utterly exhausted. Is there any advice you can give to becoming more refreshed after traveling all night?
I just haven't had that experience. And a few people are like, well, gosh, it wears me out. So it's hard for me to really comment on that because that hasn't been my experience. But I would ask some questions like, is this something that is, are you experiencing any resistance? Are you spending all night doing this. How long are your experience? I would have to inquire because that has not been my experience, and I haven't really dug into it, so I can't really advise on that particular aspect. But now you make me want to research it.
Yeah. I would say 3 things, CMC. I'm just going to take a wild guess here and say, get some sour cream potato chips. Make sure you get in the water, right? And then and soak up that light, and maybe you'll have a little more refreshed.
Yeah, you can actually go to the other side and just take a bath. It's so cool. Or lie on the beach. There's, because there are astral lakes, and it's the craziest thing you've ever seen. You can float on the water, and it's like, oh my God. People are just like, isn't this nice? We don't have to go. No pain. It's
field trip.
Yeah, I have not experienced. I have to say for another time, I've had some very slight experiences, but maybe that's something I need to pick up and try ourselves. Maybe some in our community, maybe that's something we can work on. Kind of.
And we really could have a field trip.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. We can have a group field trip. Yes. All
CMC,
right.
I was going to tell you before we go, maybe you should set an intention that you would like to feel rested after you have your traveling session. Think about it before you go.
Yeah. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Preston, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast
amazing
talking to you tonight.
Oh, and thanks for having me on.
Once again, there's like about a bazillion other things we could talk about. Before we do leave, when can we expect the next out-of-body experience book? You said it's coming.
Yes. Well, right now I'm working on Not From Here, Volume 5, which is the UFO book, which is almost complete. And that out-of-body book is next in line. So I'm hoping, by April or May, I'm going to put out Symmetry number 2.
Next year.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So Dolly's Story Part 2 is coming out also?
Yeah, because her experience is so extensive. If you're going to read one of my UFO books, that's the one I'd recommend.
I already wrote it down. This is it right there. Symmetry, and I want the healing one. Yeah.
Very cool.
See, you're making my Christmas shopping easy, Preston.
He's got 30 books, and you can just pick a few, and they'll be,
All right.
Yeah, or check out my YouTube channel. If you're not into reading, I put out a lot of my research.
I just went and subscribed to you while we were doing this. Yes. And I shared it, I think, about 5 times in the chat. So if you all missed it, that's your own fault.
It's in chat. And if you're listening later at a different time, at a different place, feel free to check down below, and that will be in the description box as well. And go follow those things and check it out.
Yes.
And thanks again, Preston, for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for coming in and hanging out in chat tonight and bringing in some wonderful questions and just creating an awesome community as always.
And Dolly herself was here in the chat with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we have some connections going on there, some chatting going on, and maybe some connections being made there. So excellent, everyone. Thanks again. We will be coming back next week is going to be our Christmas show. So, we're right around the corner. And then after that, we are going to have our New Year's Eve predictions where we'll go over all the predictions that were made last year. And then we'll have some friends on to make predictions for 2024. We always welcome those. You can, there's a channel in there. You can put your predictions in. And we're going to have some friends on. Who do we have so far? I know that Priestess is coming on. Tarot Mama's coming on. So, and we'll have more.
And I think we might be hearing from Nabnia as well.
Okay. Well, that sounds excellent. All right. So thank you again so much.
I'll make one more prediction. I'll make a prediction right now for next year.
What's that?
I'm probably will be buying all 3 of Preston's books that come out.
There you go.
Prediction for me.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Take care, and we will see you all next time.